Last fall, Ontario's independent advisor on corrections reform issued the second of two detailed reports recommending fundamental change of how the province runs its prison system. One of the points he flagged for action was the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in custody. Howard Sapers issued those reports prior to his role advising Ontario on corrections reform. He was the Correctional Investigator of Canada. Also with us tonight to consider this issue, Pamela Palmater, Chair in Indigenous Governance at Ryerson University, and we are delighted to have both of you back in our studio tonight for what is obviously a timely and important conversation. You both know these numbers all too well, but let's share them with our audience. Sheldon, bring these up if you would. While only 3% of Canada's population is Indigenous, fully 27.4% of our prison population is Indigenous. And let's show some more numbers now. This is in the province of Ontario, where 2% of the province's population is Indigenous, but 13% of Ontario's prison population is Indigenous, and 37.6% of women in federal custody are Indigenous. This disproportionate over-incarceration for Indigenous people has been happening for decades. Start us off. You've studied this intensely. Why is it happening?
Well, there's so many reasons. There's so many reasons. So we can start with colonial contact. We can start with colonialism. These are lingering effects of colonialism. There's no mistake about that. We often talk about systemic discrimination, but what systemic discrimination often starts with are policies and programs and laws that maybe weren't intended to be racist or biased, but end up in their implementation. And sometimes they're even race-driven. And so what we have is we have a population in Canada that has suffered loss of culture, loss of language, dispossession from land. There's actually been race-based legislation. And it's not just current. It's intergenerational. So you have family trauma, you have family dysfunction, you have community dysfunction, you have communities that are reeling from suicide or from addiction or from chronic underemployment or unemployment and housing shortages, and those communities do not create healthy individuals.
That may explain, but Pam, let me get you to amplify on it anyway. You know, some people are going to ask, why would something that may have happened 100 or 200 years ago have an impact on somebody today?
Well, the short answer to that is that it's still happening today. So Indian policy, since its creation, has always been about removing Indians out of the way for development, railroads, settlement, and all of that stuff. So you're talking about forced sterilization, scalping laws, the more severe kind of removal, and then you're talking about residential schools. Taking Indians, moving them out of the way, and trying to assimilate them into the body population. Prisons have become essentially the new residential schools. There are people that go straight from foster care right into youth corrections, right into prison. It's a complete pipeline. And then there's other people that are imprisoned for political reasons, protest, defending land, defending water, all of those things. So if all of those things had stopped 200 years ago, we'd be well on the way to healing.
But they haven't.
But they haven't stopped. And I would say that it is very direct, it is very racist, and we've had numerous commissions and inquiries that looked at justice with regards to Indigenous peoples, and they have all concluded that the issue is racism.
Why is the female population going up so significantly in prisons?
Well, I think historically, Indigenous women have always been targeted. So they were targeted for the removal of children, sexualized violence by police officers, the very first Northwest Police, and also for removing of children, murdered and missing Indigenous women. You've got this scenario where Indigenous women suffer triple disadvantage, disabilities, being a woman, being Indigenous, and all of those laws and policies, including the Indian Act, which still discriminates against them, have never been addressed. And so you see it now. You see this booming rate of Indigenous women and little girls in corrections. You see murdered and missing Indigenous women, higher rates of suicide, higher mental health issues, and that's all because this is ongoing.
Howard, I'd like you to explain a term that many people will not know. GLADUE, G-L-A-D-U-E.
Sure. So GLADUE refers to a decision of the Supreme Court of Canada, and it's now a couple decades since that decision. And in essence, that decision was about a young woman who was charged with a serious violent crime. And previous to her conviction, the Criminal Code of Canada had been amended, and judges were instructed to take consideration of a number of factors, including factors that might be particular to in this case, an Aboriginal young woman. And so there was her sentence was appealed and eventually got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court issued some pretty significant guidance about how you would make that criminal code amendment operational, the kinds of things you should consider. So it was to take a number of characteristics into account, the life history of somebody into an account. It wasn't a race-based discount on a conviction, which was an offensive way that some people talked about GLADUE. It was instruction to the court on how to apply the law. And so we now see that if you're the survivor of a residential school, if you or your family were involved in the 60s scoop, if your economic prospects have been diminished because of policies that affected your ability to buy property or gain employment, et cetera, all of these disadvantages should be considered.
They're all mitigating circumstances.
Well, to make your sentence reasonable, proportionate, fair, and just.
Is that happening?
No.
Why is it not happening?
So there's been lots of problems with the implementation of GLADUE. So one is, as I say, there was a reaction that said, wait a minute, we can't give people a discount on their crime just because they happen to be Indigenous. The other thing is that there was lots of training and attention paid to people to gather the GLADUE kind of information, to get the personal history details. There wasn't lots of training and support for how to apply that information. So one thing that's happened, for example, if I'm being assessed for those GLADUE factors, and it turns out in my background is family dysfunction, some family violence, I've suffered some trauma, I may have some histories of addiction or some other issues, those very same things which could be tied to colonial history, those very same things, once you get into corrections, don't become mitigating, they become aggravating. Those same things which are supposed to be protective in terms of a GLADUE analysis, in fact, elevate my risk. As far as corrections is concerned, they become risk factors, which means I'm going to be held at higher security. It means I'm going to spend more time in custody before release. It diminishes my chances, frankly, of having any rehabilitative effect of my sentence, and it diminishes my chances of success once I am released in the community.
How distressed are you that the GLADUE principles are not being put into place?
Well, it's so far beyond the law. It's unconstitutional. It violates the charter. You've got a judgment from the Supreme Court, which was reaffirmed again in Ipili, saying, listen, you've got to find alternatives to prison for people with these factors. And instead, despite being a cure for discrimination, they actually use it to further discriminate against Indigenous people. And it's getting worse. And that's the problem. So since GLADUE, prison rates have increased, not decreased. But here's the issue. Who's accountable for that? The chief of police isn't accountable for the over-policing and racism against Indigenous people. The chief justices aren't accountable. What's their punishment if they over-incarcerate people? And the politicians, it's not even on their priority list. So this crisis is not being given any kind of priority, and no one's being held accountable for the lives that are literally being destroyed.
Well, it's often the case that if 10 people are in charge, nobody's in charge, right? So if a whole bunch of different people, judges, politicians, police officers, continue the list, if all of these people have a hand in ensuring that GLADUE happens, who's actually responsible at the end of the day for making sure that it does?
When the new federal government was elected, the Prime Minister issued some mandate letters, and the mandate letter to the Minister of Justice was really clear: address over-incarceration of Indigenous men and women. So we also, at the same time, were dealing with the way forward recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and so commitments have been made about nation-to-nation reconciliation. So it is actually on the table.
For the Minister of Justice.
And it is a current political discussion. But there's some challenges. the federal government's responsible for making the criminal law. Provincial and territorial governments are responsible for implementing the criminal law.
Split jurisdiction.
Right, so you have federal and provincial jurisdictions. So you've got all the provinces and territories dealing with this in a very different way.
All right, Pamela, I do need to ask you, the Minister of Justice in Canada today is an Indigenous woman. And I need to ask you whether you think she is doing what she needs to do, being responsible for the things she is responsible for, to improve this situation.
She hasn't on any justice front, but specifically with regard to the over-incarceration of people. There's been talk about it. There's been some sympathy from her about the situation, but in terms of concrete action to reduce those numbers or prevent incarceration to begin with, nothing's happening. And sadly, when we advocate at the United Nations or any international forum on these things, her representatives say, well, you know, it's complicated. There's a federal government, provincial, territorial government. You know, it's really too hard. And that in itself looks at the problem. First Nations should be in charge of their own policing, own justice, and own corrections issues, not the federal and provincial governments. Why would we continue to ask the people who are most racist against us to find the solutions when the solutions themselves are used against us and make the situation worse?
Have you met with the Justice Minister?
Jody Wilson-Raybould?
Yeah.
Not since she's become minister.
Not since.
No. But she makes it more difficult. Think about our public advocacy. It's easy to pick on someone like Stephen Harper, who's he just says the worst things, and his government was very outrageous in terms of First Nations. Public goes, wow, that's crazy. But now this government can trot out an Indigenous woman and say, oh, look at what we're doing. We're talking about over-incarceration and not do anything. So what does that say to the public? The public's like, well, if she's not concerned, maybe we shouldn't be concerned. So it makes our advocacy role much harder, and it's already hard to get attention for people in prison.
I know you're not a politician, and I know you love to stay away from partisan politics, but, I mean, Pamela has raised a curious issue here. Is there a way out of this somehow?
I think there are several ways out of this, and I was going to say several ways forward because, of course, I'm thinking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Justice Murray Sinclair did a wonderful job of giving us a framework that we can rely on, we can look at. I have seen some movement forward. I have seen initiatives in the work I'm doing in Ontario, for example, in the Ontario government's commitment in terms of responding to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I have seen some movement forward even in the Correctional Service of Canada. There are little glimmers of hope. Some sections that were specific to Indigenous men and women in the federal law that governs corrections, we're seeing a slight increase in the number of people that are being released under what's called Section 84, which is about being released to an Indigenous community. We're seeing renewed discussions about creating more healing lodge space.
So that's encouraging.
There's these glimmers that make me hopeful.
Let me try one thing with you, though, Pamela. You just said a second ago that it makes no sense to have, in your view, the most racist institutions in our society in charge of all of this. I understand how if an Indigenous person is alleged to have committed a crime 10 hours from this studio in unceded territory in a much more remote part of Ontario, I get that. There's no analogous Indigenous police force in downtown Ottawa or downtown Toronto. So if an Indigenous person commits a crime in either of those two places, to whom are they supposed to be turned over, if not the current racist system you abhor?
Well, exactly. The problem is those systems aren't in place. They haven't been allowed to be in place. You do see tribal police forces on some First Nations. You do see tribal courts in the United States and in Canada that operate with phenomenal success. Why that hasn't been replicated across the country is a question for both the Justice Minister and the Prime Minister.
Could that be done in big cities across this country?
It could be done. Of course it could be done. I mean, you couldn't get much worse than the current Toronto police force. You've got lots of issues around deaths in police custody for Indigenous peoples, things like starlight tours, sexualized violence that's happening all across the country, and that's not being addressed, both in terms of policing and in corrections once you're in the institutions.
Let me do one more thing with Howard then on this. Can you imagine recommending to the Government of Ontario that it create a parallel police service run, staffed, organized by Indigenous people specifically to treat alleged crimes perpetrated by Indigenous people?
Steve, I think the answer is yes, amongst many other things. Whether we would need a Metro Toronto Indigenous Police Department or not, I don't know. Because there's also been some tremendous failures in terms of creating parallel systems. But we can innovate. We can innovate around things like better application of GLADU within the existing structure. We can innovate around creating Indigenous program and policy divisions, departments, cultural awareness training. We can have a better legal and accountability framework to make sure that people are actually doing what they've said in their their mission and mandate statements. So there's lots that we can do.
Short of what I just suggested.
Short of that, but I would say let's look at all the options, because the status quo is not acceptable. So let's be innovative, let's be creative, and let's not be defensive.
Okay. Here is, you all remember Michael Bryan. He used to be the Attorney General of Ontario. He just recently was appointed the head of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. And here's what he had to write last December in the Toronto Star regarding what we've been discussing here tonight. Add a new section to the Criminal Code, 718.22. Notwithstanding anything in this act, i.e. mandatory minimums don't apply, when a court imposes a sentence on an Aboriginal offender for an offense other than a primary designated offense, that's terrorism or murder, the court shall not sentence an Aboriginal offender to imprisonment except where justified by the Crown as necessary and proportionate, with particular attention to the systemic circumstances of Aboriginal offenders and taking into account the following factors: where available and appropriate, with reduced reliance upon principles of general deterrence and increased reliance upon principles of rehabilitation, namely restorative justice principles and processes, and culturally appropriate sentencing alternatives, for example, sentencing circles. That's an alternative idea. Could that work, Pam?
I mean, we don't know, we haven't tried it, but I've always been a proponent, not of mandatory minimum sentences, which makes the situation worse, but mandatory alternatives. Why couldn't there be, for a category of offenses, at a minimum, mandatory alternatives, just to make it completely illegal for you to imprison someone for stealing food from a grocery store, or stealing a car to drive a child to a medical appointment because they couldn't get there, or they'd lose their kids to CFS. I mean, there's just so many conditions under which there should be legally mandatory alternatives, and I think some variation of that is a possibility.
Howard?
Well, sure. You know, the ironic thing is as you were reading that, I'm thinking that, the criminal code already says that incarceration is supposed to be the last resort. For you, for me, for an Indigenous man or woman, for anybody. The incarceration is supposed to be the last resort. And in fact, the sentencing provisions that were challenged in GLADU are kind of like the provisions that Michael Bryan is talking about. So we already have a legal framework that would allow us to do exactly that. Whether it would be enhanced with a criminal code amendment or not, I can't say. I can tell you that it didn't work simply by amending the code, didn't work. Simply by issuing a Supreme Court's judgment, didn't work. So it's something deeper in the system that we have to do.
Changing hearts and minds and culture and all of that.
Changing hearts and minds and culture and all of that. That should probably be the title of this show, because I've just given a couple of reports, as you mentioned, with lots of discussion about change the policy and create new law. That's important. That's foundational stuff. But unless you change attitudes, unless you give the system back the discretion it's supposed to have, as Pam was talking about, eliminating mandatory minimums, giving courts the kind of discretion they're supposed to have so that justice can truly be individualized, proportionate, and rational, all the criminal code amendments in the world aren't going to change things.
Sure. Okay, in our remaining moments here, let's do what you haven't been able to do yet. I'm going to put you in the Minister of Justice's office for that one-on-one meeting, and you're going to say to her, Minister, here is the first thing you've got to do to make an improvement on this disproportionate situation where Indigenous people are dramatically overrepresented in our prisons. What are you telling her?
You have to dramatically fund the alternatives. The number one reason why judges say, I have to put this person in prison is because there is no money at the Aboriginal community or anywhere else to have the alternative. There's no supports, there's no mechanisms. They need to clean house in terms of policing and corrections. And I mean clean house. Anyone who's been accused of sexual violence, racism, and all of that stuff, that totally needs to be done. And they need to put these issues in the hands of First Nations where they can and where there are First Nations that are willing. If they did those three things, there'd be a marketable difference, in addition to doing a gender-based analysis of the current system that's broken.
Howard, I'm going to make sort of the same deal with you. Now, when you write your two reports, do you, I know you obviously give them to the minister responsible, but do you go in and give a briefing to cabinet or anything like that?
Yeah, I talk to whoever will listen. And the nice thing about the job that I'm doing right now is that I've really been invited into those discussions. So I'm actually very hopeful. And I would support what Pam just said about those three things, but I would actually gather my cabinet colleagues together, and I would get the ministers responsible for housing and health and education and social services and employment development and economic development. And I'd say, hey guys, I would really like to see myself out of a job as the minister responsible for corrections. So what are we going to do to stem the flow? Because you see, once somebody's that deeply enmeshed in the system that they've got a criminal conviction, that they're in a jail or a prison somewhere in this country, it's too late. The single biggest predictor that you'll be in jail is that you had a previous experience in jail. So let's stem the flow. And really what we know works is we know that the kind of social development initiatives.
Just explain what that means. Like, what do you, if you're in this fictitious meeting, you're going to the Minister of Health and you're saying, here's how you, Minister of Health, can prevent a disproportionate number of Indigenous peoples ending up in our jails.
Treat addiction like the health issue it is. It's not a criminal justice issue. There's a great example. Early intervention for young children, particularly those where their families are at risk because of their economic status or because of intergenerational trauma within that family. So we've already identified those families, but what we're doing now is, again, we're splitting them up. The kids go into children's aid and the parents end up going to jail.
Pamela, let me give you the last word on this last question. How united, in your view, is the Indigenous world in this country on the issues we've been talking about here?
On over-incarceration, well, like I said, in every venue, over-incarceration gets almost the lowest priority because we're trying to deal with other crisis issues like kids in care and housing and water and all of these things, a lack of education, lack of access to land and treaty rights, which are all root causes for what happens in the very end over incarceration. But I think amongst the people who work in this area, there's a large degree of consensus around this isn't working, we need to take control, or at least some aspect of control, and we need to address, like what Howard was saying, root causes. I mean, 2/3 of people in prison, 2/3 had some form of contact with foster care, child and family services. We are literally creating a pipeline to prison. People like Cindy Blackstock have sued the government. The government refuses to address that issue. So it's guaranteeing, no matter what justice does with their internal initiatives, that that pipeline will continue. So we need to address all of those feeder groups that go to prison.
I want to thank both of you for coming on TVO tonight and shining a light on this most urgent problem. Howard Sapers, the Independent Advisor on Corrections Reform to the Government of Ontario. Pamela Palmater from Ryerson University here in Toronto. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.